Welcome to Healing Honeys, the podcast for girls with big dreams trying to balance it all. I'm Louise Rumball, serial entrepreneur, type A overachiever, healing girlie, and holistic wellness coach who also once got called the Jesus of modern dating. But let's get one thing straight. My healing era has never been calm. I'm talking savage dating stories, 20 cigarettes a day, daddy issues, an anxious attachment style, and an autoimmune disorder too. Today, I've spent thousands of dollars on healing and therapy, and now I'm here to guide you, love you, and laugh with you as I share my favorite tips, tricks, and rituals that have saved me along the way. With new episodes every Wednesday, expect girl talk, psychology, and the nervous system, as well as love, sex, and dating, wellness, fitness, and a little bit of business and spirituality too. So get in, honey. We are balancing healing, hustling, and life, and the best is yet to come. And if you're looking for ad-free listening or my somatic healing subscription daily devotion, just head over to the show notes. Now, let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Healing Honeys. I'm your host, Louise Rumball. I'm so happy to have you here with me. And if you can hear my voice, it is early. I am recording this earlier than I ever normally record a podcast. And I am not a morning person. You guys know that I am not a morning person. I have had periods of my life when I can be a morning person, like when I've really got my shit together, in quotation marks, and I'm really doing the things that I know we're supposed to do and that as a holistic wellness coach, I tell you to do as well. When I'm doing those things, I actually am a morning person. And it's really cool to see how my body can be like, hey, it's morning, let's go. But, you know, I've got a lot of travel going on at the moment and I'm kind of a bit jet lagged. And yeah, this morning podcast recording is giving me husky morning voice. So I just wanted to apologize for that. But this morning I'm giving you a guide. It's for my oversharing bitches. We are talking about zip it or spill the tea. And right before we got on this recording, I started to think how ironic it was that I was doing this episode because my entire life is on this podcast. I mean, I feel like you guys quite literally know all of my ex-boyfriends, everything that's happened, how many people I've slept with, probably to some extent, even how much money I make. We've spoken about my sex life, how I like to have sex. Like I have shared a lot with you guys, but for the most part, it's been the most healing experience. So I think I just want to say thank you so much for always holding my experiences with love and kindness and warmth, even when they are ones that I have had to learn from the hard way. So I'm very grateful for you. But yeah, there was like a sense of irony in the air, which was like, oh, I'm recording an episode on oversharing. And I literally shared a lot on this podcast. But the thing is that I don't even think it's oversharing. I think that I talk to you guys like you're my friends, like you're my best friends. Like I would have this conversation with my friends. And that's something we're going to get into today, which is why we overshare, how to stop oversharing, how to work out when is the right time to do that, and also working out who are the people that you can and should overshare with. But most of all, I actually hate the word oversharing because it's like implying that you did something wrong. And I do think that there are some situations when like, yeah, sure, we probably shouldn't be sharing certain things. But for the most part, I also want to just pivot on that concept of oversharing. And I think we're going to get into that in today's episode. Now, you guys know that I always like to start with helping us understand exactly what we're talking about, because I think in today's society, we use a lot of words, whether it's like trauma or even anxiety. And I think that oversharing and sharing are a really good example of this. So let's get into what they actually mean. Now, I've written down here that sharing is an intentional act where we communicate thoughts, feelings, or experiences to connect or communicate authentically. It's rooted in a place of safety, trust, and mutual respect. But oversharing, on the other hand, is when we share too much too soon. And it can leave us feeling exposed, anxious, and shameful afterwards. Now, this is something that I think is so interesting, is that as I did my research here, it said that oversharing often comes from a place of emotional dysregulation or impulse when we're trying to gain connection, approval, validation, or avoid awkwardness. We often reveal more than is comfortable or that we're comfortable with. And that word impulse for me really hit home. And it brought back this memory that literally makes me cringe when I think about it. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm an overthinker, I'm an oversharer, I'm an overspeaker. Like I act quickly. I definitely used to act from a place of, I guess, like lack of regulation before I started regulating my nervous system. And I have this one memory that like haunts me. This is like literally so awkward, but I'm sharing it so you guys know that you are not alone with anything that you have shared that makes you want to literally die inside and like go and move to Timbuktu. Okay, so this was like over a decade and a half ago, but I was on, oh my God, I'm cringing. I was on my way to a wedding and I was on the back of the bus that like took everyone to a wedding and I was there with my friend and her boyfriend. Oh my God. So basically, they used to live with me in a house. So I knew them very well, but I was definitely friends with the girl more so than with the guy. But I mean, we definitely had situations, when you're like at university or college where just the craziest shit happens and just doesn't happen like that in adulthood for the most part. Like, I remember one time I had a guy in my bed, and this guy, the guy that I'm talking about, my friend's boyfriend, he just walked into our bedroom totally naked with like a massive erection and was like, guys, I need some lube. I need some lube. I'm not even joking. This is a real story. Anyway, I was like so drunk at the time. I was like 19 that I honestly don't remember it, or I've just like blacked it all out because it was like just quite a shocking experience all around. Anyway, what I mean is like I know this guy, but like I don't know him that well, if that makes sense. And it's kind of very similar to the fact that you know, that whole phrase like, oh, we can't speak to people about our emotions today, but we can like put their genitals in our mouth. Now I can confirm I did not put my friend's boyfriend's genitals in my mouth, but it's the same kind of thing, right? Like we can know people intimately without sometimes actually even knowing them. Anyway, I've gone off on a tangent here, but my point is like I knew this guy and we've been in some weird situations and funny situations, and that was just life when you were like drunk at college or university. But back to the bus. So we're on the back of the bus and we're talking about star signs. Oh my God, I'm cringing again. And I said to him in front of everyone, we're like having a group discussion. So what's your star sign? And he says, I'm a Scorpio. Guys, guys, I say, oh, that makes sense why you have a massive dick. Oh my God, I'm cringing so bad. Like that is like literally so, I'm literally, oh my God, it makes me feel so uncomfortable. Anyway, that is the prime example of oversharing, speaking without thinking, speaking on impulse. Like, why did I do that? Um, Maybe I thought it was going to be funny. Maybe I just am a very inappropriate person. Maybe I felt socially awkward and I was like trying to make a joke. Maybe I'm just neurodivergent and we just speak without thinking. I don't really know. But what I know is like that moment has stayed with me for a long, long time. Here we are, a decade and a half later, still talking about it. So, if you say things without thinking or you speak without emotional regulation, I want you to know you're not alone. I am there with you. I have been there. And I actually think this whole, speaking before we think is really interesting. And actually in neurodivergence, and for those who are neurodivergent, this concept of impulsivity is like a real thing. And there can be a real challenge with impulse control. And also the brain, just more generally for everyone, it always wants to prioritize connection with other humans. And so I think this is my first question is like, when you're asking yourself, like, am I oversharing? Or, why am I telling this person things about me, like a coworker on lunch or a new friend or a friend of a friend or someone on a night out? Then you have to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Like, first of all, is there anything that is inhibiting your impulse control? Like, are you drunk? Are you socially nervous? Are you in a situation that you wouldn't normally be in? I just think those are good things to realize, because if you realize, like, oh, when I feel socially awkward, I say things that I regret, or oh, when I'm drunk, I say or do things that like I didn't really want to do when I was sober. It's just like the first part of the puzzle to be like, okay, cool. A plus B equals C. A, getting drunk, plus hanging out with people that I don't know equals C, oversharing or sharing information that maybe I shouldn't have. So that is my first reflection piece. And I think for me, I was just socially awkward in that situation. And I thought it was funny. And I think that then the second question about oversharing is why? Why are you oversharing? And I think there are so many things that can come into this. And the first one is that ultimately, sharing or oversharing is just a bid for connection. So, as human beings, like I said, we want to connect with other human beings. We want to be, from an evolutionary perspective, part of the pack. We want to be accepted and liked. And I think that is very soothing for our nervous system to be in connection for the most part. But in today's society, we don't live in an environment anymore where we have these huge tribes, where we have like 50 of us who live in a cave. So we have to engage with a lot of new people on a day-to-day basis, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's at a party, whether that's friends of friends. And I think that our nervous systems aren't necessarily wired from an evolutionary standpoint to like know how to deal with these strangers or these new people, or even how to act in situations with people that we do know. But I think the understanding that oversharing or sharing comes from like a place of a bid for connection is a real way to be kinder to yourself and understand and acknowledge like, oh, that's why I do this. Like I was just trying to connect with people. And I think that that is really helpful on this journey for us just to being a little bit kinder to ourselves. And I think another reason that we overshare is that we try and fill the silence, right? So I think there's a belief in today's society that if there's silence in a conversation, it's very awkward. And I think we see this more than ever when we go on a first date with someone. It's like, you don't want there to be any silence. You're scared of awkward silences. And so you just fill it and you just keep talking and talking and talking. And I saw this TikTok the other day, and it was this girl being like, was I into him or do I just have crazy fucking riz? Was I into him or did I lead that whole date because I can vibe with anyone? And this, I think, is so interesting because it's like from a nervous system perspective, we fill the silence because silence is really uncomfortable for us as human beings because we aren't really human beings that are taught to sit in silence. Because when we're taught to sit in silence, we have to basically face up to sensations that are going on within our nervous system. And that is very uncomfortable for the most part. You know, a huge part of nervous system regulation and healing work is like being able to be in our body and deal with the discomfort of not saying something or the discomfort of just like handling a situation. And so because we're not really taught to deal with those kind of sensations inside of us, we just fill the silence and we want to be funny, we want to be liked, we want the other person to like us. On a date, the whole thing is just so fucking performative. It's like, have you ever put the best version of yourself forward anywhere other than going on a first date? Like, no, I don't think that you do. But I think that's the second thing about oversharing is understanding that we all have an inherent desire to be liked. And so it's okay that sometimes if that driver, that bid for connection, the desire to be liked, to be thought that you're funny or interesting or that, you know, you are worthy of hanging out with or worthy of being invited to the dinner party, that's a real human experience. And sometimes that need for connection, that need to be liked, it kind of puts a lens over the top of like what we are sharing and how we are sharing it. And again, it comes back to this point around like impulse control and actually not ever thinking, should I share this? We think, in fact, we don't think, we just say things because like we want to have a great time or we want everyone to have a great time. And then we have to deal with the repercussions, i.e. the back of a bus on the way to a wedding, where I think I was like quite literally rutting about that. Well, I'm still rutting about it like 15 years later. But I think at that point, I was like, yeah, it definitely like ruined the day for me. I was just so embarrassed. True shame hangover. Now, I think a third thing that is so interesting about oversharing is that oversharing can be tied to the fight and flight part of the nervous system. And also freeze and fawn too. But for the most part, if you are someone that is like more anxious, you're more likely to go into fight or flight. You are much more likely to kind of be like, have more energy in your system, to be a little bit more like restless or irritable. And you are more likely to say things or do things that maybe come from like a dysregulated place. And they don't always have to come from a negative place. Like they can also come from like a place of real excitement. You know, we have all done like crazy shit on nights out where we're just drunk and we're just like having the best time and we just think it's fucking funny. And I don't want to like rain on that parade, you know, some of those memories. I remember like standing on top of the bar in, I think it was like Cafe Sol or something like that. That's not the name. This like dirty, dirty bar in Clapham. I was like playing the bongos on top of the bar in front of the entire club. Like, what was I doing? But it was so fun. Like, I look back at that memory with like so much fun. So I don't want you guys to think I'm here like shitting on us having fun and sharing our truth. That's definitely not. I'm just here to help us understand that when we understand ourselves and how we communicate, it can change our experience that we have in the world and we can have a more enjoyable, calm experience. Okay, so this whole fight, flight, freeze, form thing is really interesting because if you're more likely to be in fight or flight, you're more likely to just like do things and say things and snap and like not really think through things because your body's in like a stress state and a stress response. But what's really interesting is that in freeze, you're definitely less likely to overshare. But in fawn, you are more likely to overshare because fawn is associated with people pleasing. Now, this is basically when your nervous system says, I'm going to shut down at all costs because I just need everyone around me to be safe and to like me. And if I do that, then I am inherently safe and everything's going to be okay. So if we are someone that goes through the fawn stage of the nervous system, if we are a people pleaser, we try to avoid discomfort inside of us by connecting with others, people pleasing, getting their approval, getting their validation, getting attention. And that often leads to spilling more information than is necessary because you want the approval of others. So what happens when we want the approval of others? We again try to be funny. We share things that maybe we wouldn't share. Maybe we like make up stories. We make them a little funnier than they are. We like big them up a little bit more than they are. So I just think it's interesting. Like if you are someone that kind of does share things like too fast, too soon, because remember that was in the definition, then it's just good to ask yourself, like, how does my nervous system react when I'm around other people? I think that is why we end up having this shame hangover after we've like overshared or we've done or said something that we shouldn't. Like, we just have this feeling that we're too much. And that was me, like, on the back of the bus. And I think that after oversharing, many of us can experience this rush of shame within our body. Like, you feel like you've exposed too much of yourself and we deeply regret it. Like, this level of exposure is basically like a lack of safety. And that lack of safety is because we feel like our inner wounds, our inner world, our inner child have just been so like shone a spotlight on. But the craziest thing is like we did it. We shone that spotlight like on those parts of us by oversharing. So it's a very weird experience when you can feel so much shame, but it's like for something you did. And so you can really be like, why the fuck did I do that? Like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. And often after oversharing, I think we become our harshest critic. Like we replay the conversation over and over in our heads. Like we wish we could take it back. Why did I do that? Should I message them? Should I say sorry? Should I say sorry for sharing too much? I hope you don't think that I'm too much. And this can just lead to this horrible cycle of anxiety, withdrawal, self-blame, self-criticism. And that's very stressful for us. So I think it's just really interesting to see this cycle of how emotional dysregulation can lead to oversharing. Oversharing can lead to shame, guilt, and regret. And shame, guilt, and regret can lead to our internal critic going on overdrive, which can lead to more anxiety and more emotional dysregulation. So it's kind of like a cycle that we can really get stuck in. Now, I don't want to sit here like shitting on oversharing because I actually think that there is liberation in true openness. Like, I remember once that my therapist said to me, this was like right as I'd only done like 6 months of the podcast and only like a few thousand people were listening each month. She said to me, even if the podcast doesn't get any bigger than it gets now, this has been the most healing experience for you, being able to share your journey with other people and be liked and celebrated and appreciated and accepted for all of the dark parts of your journey that you feel so shameful, so regretful about. And that's because I found liberation in being vulnerable. I found liberation in being open. So what I want to say here is like, I think that there is a difference between openness and oversharing. So I think that sharing from a place of authenticity with the right people at the right time is openness because it's grounded in trust. It's grounded in you saying, I want to share this part of me with you. It's grounded in emotional safety with you knowing that you don't need anything from the other person when you share this. And if they reject you or they criticize you, for the most part, you are okay with that because you have done enough healing to understand like this is part of my story and I don't need anything from you when I share it with you because I am learning to be at home in myself, to accept myself. That is emotional safety. It comes from a place of embodiment. It comes from a place of acceptance. It comes from a place of saying, this is my journey and I can sit with my journey and I can share it with you, but it's not your journey. So really your thoughts and opinions on it aren't actually going to affect me. And this is something that I've learned in therapy is that there's a lot of judgment around in today's society. And particularly if you're on social media, it's crazy. Like the trolling is crazy. The reviews are crazy. Like everything is just crazy. But what my therapist has taught me is that if you have a shame wound, you really, really care about what everyone has to think about you because everyone else is a mirror for you about what is going on inside of you. But when you start to heal that shame wound, when you start to come out of your head and come back into your body, you start to acknowledge and understand that actually their opinion about anything about you or someone's opinion about you it really isn't that important because you get to decide who's important to you. You get to decide whose opinions you value and that you are going to take on board. So I think that's the thing about true openness. It's about being open about how you feel, being open about who you are, being open about how and what you have lived through. Whereas oversharing, it almost comes from this place of lack. It's like, I need to share everything very fast so you maybe will connect me or we can like connect over something. I think one of them comes from like a warm place of acceptance, and the other one comes from like a more hot and fiery or like painful and dark place of, I guess, lack from inside of us. So I just really want you guys to understand the healing power of being open and the healing power of realizing that when you start to share your story with the world, there is really nothing that you could have done or have gone through that healthy people would judge you for. Like, I don't judge anyone for anything. I really, really don't. It's a weird world that we live in where there's like definitely this big opportunity to be cancelled today, but there's also an opportunity where like you can actually just be accepted for who you are. And I think we saw this on the episode with Beck Antonucci. She came on and spoke about her experience with STIs and with herpes. And she basically said that the moment that she stopped holding that shameful secret in the dark and realized how many millions of people have herpes, how many millions of people have STIs, how it's just part of the human experience. And there's a risk with everything that we do in life. And there are risks with sex, just like anything else. And she realized that when she was able to shed the shame around it and was able to talk about it and be open about it and, share about it, there was no shame there anymore. She said, like, literally people around me were like, oh, yeah, me too, I have it. Or, oh, yeah, cool. Like, I don't care. Let's use a condom or whatever the response was. For the most part, she said that the liberation that she found in being open was so healing for her. And so not only now is she liberated and she accepts a part of herself that like she condemned or shamed, she's also built like a 6-figure business around helping other women release their shame as well. So I think there's just such a beautiful upside, like when we can accept what we have gone through and learn from it, we can then help others. We can then step into our own place of liberation. But before we do that, before we do the healing work, sharing the experience before it's like fully integrated into our nervous system with love and acceptance, it can be very traumatizing for us. And also we can just disconnect and talk about our trauma. Like I remember when I used to talk about cheating on my boyfriends and how traumatizing that was for me when I was younger. I would very logically share that story and I would very logically talk about it from an analysis place coming from my brain. There was no emotional connection for me talking about that. I hadn't integrated the experience inwards to sit with the deep pain that it caused me, the deep pain that it caused other people, and then be able to share from a place of warmth and emotional compassion. So that's another thing that I would say is if you are sharing, I think you share from the heart. You feel into the things you are saying. But if you are oversharing, you share from the mouth, you share from the brain. It is very fast, it's very logical, it's very happening up here, it's very cerebral, rather than happening from your heart, sharing how you feel, how it felt, and what you learned from the experience. Because we have all learned so much from what we have gone through, and it can be a real place and bid for connection when it is with the right people. And a huge part of my journey has been working out like what people actually deserve access to that information from you. Learning to bring down the mask, bring down the people pleasing, not just tell everything, everyone like upfront. It's about taking things slower. It's about asking, do I want to share information with this person? Is it likely that this person is going to be a good friend? What do I know about this person? Are they a safe person? Have I heard that they go and bitch about everyone? And when we start to reflect on these questions, we start to actually be able to ask ourselves, do I want to share with this person? Do I want to do nothing? And can I prevent oversharing? So I want to give you guys a checklist for the oversharers for you to basically sit with and help reflect on why you overshare and really how you can maybe do things differently if you want to avoid that shame hangover that so many of us get when we've done a little bit too much oversharing. Now, the first thing is, what am I hoping to achieve by sharing this? Is it connection, support, sympathy, attention, or entertainment? Because asking why you maybe want to overshare something is a very good place to start. For the most part, if it's for connection, support, or sympathy, you should be going to your real friends, your inner circle to share those things. Because you can't expect connection, support, or sympathy from people that you don't really know. And also the thing is like you need a safe space when you share these things to be able to affirm you and help you move through the experience. But if you even don't know if someone is equipped to be able to have that conversation with you, it can actually be really hurtful. So start by asking, what is it that I want from sharing this piece of information? And I would also say, if it's for entertainment, I would ask yourself, where did you learn along the way that you had to be funny or interesting or the life of the party to be accepted, to be liked? And it often stems back to a belief that like we're not really enough, like without doing that. And I think that is really interesting as well. So start by asking, what am I hoping to achieve by this? Second, ask yourself, is this a safe space to share? Is the environment the right place? You know, being drunk in a nightclub is probably not conducive to having a really true, deep, intimate conversation. Although I will say my boyfriend is very much of the belief and opinion that real conversations happen at the after parties when everyone is high and drunk. So it might be that in those moments you feel like your walls and your vulnerabilities, like they come down and you're more able to share them. But what I would also say is that does that then tie into the hangover the next day where when you were truly vulnerable in those moments, which is fucking beautiful, the next day when your walls come back up, do you feel like deeply uncomfortable? So ask yourself, is this a safe space to share? And do they deserve access to this information? Because someone has to have their own level of emotional maturity, emotional kindness, emotional empathy, emotional compassion to be able to handle something that you've gone through that's deeply emotional or deeply painful. And I actually see this like all the time. I see people going to people for advice and they give them the worst fucking advice and it actually like makes the problem worse. So I would always say, are you going to a friend when you should be going to a therapist? It's definitely a home truth that I think we need to talk about more. Okay, the next thing to ask if you're an oversharer, am I sharing this from a place of emotional regulation? Now, what I will say is that the more emotionally regulated I've become, the way less I share things with people, either on the podcast or in person, that I'm like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. Because the more we regulate our nervous system, the more we come back to rest and digest, the more we come back to baseline, the more we're able to just sort of think before we speak. And that thinking before we speak is really hard, but it's definitely something that you can actively work on. You can practice taking a 1 to 2 second pause before you open your mouth. And when you start to become conscious of that, when you start to stop just automatically talking, you can realize that you can have automatic thoughts, but you don't need to use an automatic voice. So you can kind of put a circuit breaker between your thoughts and your mouth. Next, ask yourself, is there something that I'm trying to avoid by doing this? Maybe you're avoiding going to therapy. Maybe you're avoiding an awkward silence. Maybe you're just trying to avoid the date being a bad date. Ask yourself, what is the pain associated with you not sharing this piece of information? And what is the pleasure associated with you sharing this piece of information? And it can really simply, in just 2 questions, help you understand, why am I sharing this information with this person? And most of all, the final question I would always ask if you're an oversharer is, what is the potential ramifications if this information gets leaked? Now, I think we see this with bitching a lot. Is it's very easy just to join in with the bitching because I've said and mentioned previously that we are wired for human connection. We are wired to want to be connected and accepted. And the thing about Mean Girls is that our nervous systems want to be involved in that too, because it's scary to speak up for ourselves. It's scary to face the rejection of being like, I actually don't agree with you and you shouldn't be saying that. But the healthier we become, the more easy it is to be able to say that. And the more easy it is that we can sit in our nervous system being able to deal with the discomfort of saying, actually, I don't agree with you. And I think that a real sad thing that we need to kind of acknowledge today is like, there's a high likelihood for a lot of situations that your story is going to get retold, whether that's things from my podcast being retold by other people, whether that's your own personal story being retold by someone else. I do think that inherently there is this drive as human beings to be like, oh my God, did you hear about this? And I need to like research why that is. But what I would always say is just be aware, like, what are the potential ramifications of this piece of information being shared with someone else? How would you feel if someone other than the person that you are telling would know about it? Because I think that's one of the craziest things about oversharing or sharing with people that we don't really know very well is like they don't really have a sense of loyalty to us. They're a new friend. They don't have the boundaries and the respect that you build through years of friendship. So I would ask yourself, how would I feel if this piece of information was leaked? Because I think that that is a huge part of being able to understand if this person is someone you should share this information with. Okay, the final thing that I want to wrap this episode up with is this is like such an avoidant person thing to say. And you guys know I am not avoidant, but there is also a power in mystery. And I have really found this since I've done like social media breaks. And I feel like the power in mystery is that when you don't overshare everything with other people, there definitely becomes this kind of like air of people are interested in you and interested in your experience. And I think it's kind of cool to like regain the power around your own story. Like you can decide what you share. You can decide who you let into your story. You can decide who gets access to your life. And so I do think that there is some power in like reclaiming your story and not just sharing it with everyone. But then at the same time, I also think that the healing liberation of openness is so powerful too. So I think it's really just about asking yourself, where am I at this point in my life? Am I at a point where I need to go inwards? I want to go to therapy. I want to work on the painful things that are coming up in private, in a safe space, in a small group of people. Or am I at the time in my life where I can share this story with others to help them and to help myself? And I think one of the hardest things is that when we are traumatized by something, like often all we fucking want to do is talk about it. Like with my breakup, all I wanted to do was talk about my ex. Like, how could he do this to me? How could he do this to me? How could he do this to me? Like, I needed to talk about it time and time again with people. And actually, this guy, like a couple of years later, said, that was like a really intense experience for me when you were like needing to talk about it all the time. And I just like couldn't handle it. And when he said that, I was like really upset because I was also like, this guy like isn't a friend of mine, really. Like, we're not friends. But he kind of pretended like he was there for me during it. And that was the shame hangover. Like 2 years later, I felt like guilt and regret about like, why did I share this with you? Like, I feel so embarrassed. But then in that moment, again, I just realized like, wow, like you're not actually one of my best friends. Like, why was I coming to you? Why was I sharing the inner parts of my world and my life and my heart? I shouldn't have done that. And that was a huge lesson for me. Like, I think from that experience, I just will not be oversharing with everyone what I'm going through. And that element of like internal mystery, I think keeping things inside can be kind of profoundly important in the short term. And then when I think you've come to terms with the situation and come to grips with the situation, you can share with others, but share on the basis that whatever they say, it doesn't really matter. And maybe there'll be an amazing opportunity for someone to help you and heal you even more. But if they can't and if they don't, you are okay with that too. But yeah, I see a lot of people who are really distressed and distraught by situations. They need to just talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And they will chew off anyone's ear that will listen. And I'm not judging them for that. Like, that is intense emotional dysregulation. They are deeply in pain and needing help. But in those situations, it is really therapy and therapists and very, very best friends and family that we should be going to, not really people that can't hold our heart, our truth, or our experience. So, yes, this is my episode on oversharing. Zip it or share it. I hope it's helped anyone who is a bit of an oversharer understand a little bit more like why maybe you do these things and why we often, like talk without thinking, or why we share with people that don't really deserve our time and our heart and our love and our internal world. So, I hope you took value from this. Thank you so much for streaming the podcast. Please, please, please hit subscribe or follow wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe as well. It really helps me reach more people and help get this healing information to those who need it the most. Thank you so much for listening with me. I love you guys so much, and I will see you on a new episode very soon.